Certainly hope there'll be more people.
Yes, we are.
Hey, David.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Good evening. David, Wencheng and I were just having this conversation about the pipeline class. I'd love to pull you in, and that's kind of what we were thinking of covering tonight. You were in the class, right?
Yeah, I was there on Monday.
And Terrence, so were you. So it's just Wencheng who couldn't make the time because he has to work.
All right, so I want to just talk to you folks. I mean, because obviously Mash and I talked about the SageMaker pipelines. He kind of briefed me on what's going on with that, and also the workshop on Monday. And we went through a couple notebooks together. So I want to see if we can incorporate that. Obviously, we were just having a conversation, and basically we're saying, a lot of times in the end, you should do this along with the infrastructure. And I think SageMaker pipeline is certainly something we want to get into as well. And that is why I think we want to try to spend time on the AWS platform as well, and SageMaker pipelines. So we want to try to adjust the schedule a little bit and see if we can, I guess, adjust it a little bit to adapt to that. What do you folks think in terms of the order of this? So today we're gonna basically cover a little bit of, I guess some of you were at the workshop already. So we want to spend more time on some of the notebooks, perhaps from that workshop. But on the other hand, we want to spend a little bit of time to go more in depth into the book itself, because the book, even this chapter is about 60 pages. And from what I've learned from that workshop, even though I wasn't there, it was a quick work, run through and some explanation. So we want to try to be more in depth and just spend more time together on some of the notebooks and the book itself, and of course the pipelines and the ML.
For the benefit of everyone else here, David, Terrence, and Heather, when Wencheng mentions the book, we're also referring not just the pipelines book that we've been using, but the other data science with AWS book by Chris Fergley and Anchi Barth. I'm sorry, not Anchi, the JSIs, Anta Barth. And so that book, and this was the part where it was model deployment with AWS. In the 4-hour workshop on Monday that we just had, David and Terrence, you guys were on, the actual model deployment part, Anta really was able to spend no more than probably 10, 15 minutes max.
Yeah.
We breezed through it, and that really is the core part. And so the last two and a half hours before this, Wencheng and I spent creating our own SageMaker environment. So we started to debug back and forth because we both had been working with SageMaker a little bit previously. And we debugged and created our own environments, making sure the IAM configurations and everything was set up. So now we have that set up just right, and we were going to walk everyone through that. So everyone here will have their own SageMaker environment just set up and ready to go. And then walking through the initial part of, we don't have to use the data set they use, the Amazon reviews, but we do want to get to a point where maybe we use one of the data sets that we've been talking about and discussing throughout this course, the consumer complaints, and run that code on that SageMaker environment. Make sure, we'll copy the data set over into S3. We'll do the pre-processing notebooks and copy them over and see how we can run that and get that model, the model deployment on AWS try to work through that. That 60 pages chapter in the data science on AWS book. I want to try to incorporate that. And I think that is very ambitious to get done, certainly in one night like tonight. And that's where the schedule comes in. And that's what we're all trying to have, try to have this conversation. How do we fit that in here into this schedule that Wencheng is screen sharing? No, I'm going to stop my video. And figure out how we can put it in place. Wencheng, did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to see basically, do you guys want to continue with SageMakers? Maybe, move these two right after this and continue with SageMaker and SageMaker pipelines and the fabulous book, Data Science on AWS, and then get back to the pipeline orchestration with TFX, or you want to jump to TFX, then jump back to SageMaker pipelines. How do you folks want to do this?
I'm open to either.
Okay. Does anyone here have some experience with practical use cases that they've used in their own projects, jobs, and so on, working with that infrastructure MLOps side? Was there a way that an approach that you followed?
Mm-hmm.
I take that as no.
Okay, that's fine, and that's why we're here. And I guess, but any preferences in terms of the schedule before we start?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like switching over to AWS and SageMaker for a bit, might be good because it just seems really solid to kind of get into that whole flow of stuff.
Okay, so why don't we move these two sessions on top, and we will change this a little bit. We'll basically just shift our focus more on AWS SageMaker pipelines, and following this GitHub, and basically focusing on several of these chapters, especially especially the chapter 9 and chapter 10 for the next two sessions, and we'll replace these two. Then we'll get back to TFX and finish that up. So we're probably not changing the finishing line in terms of the time, but we're just shifting the schedule a little bit. Does everyone agree with that? Is everyone okay with that?
Okay. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, great. And okay, so why don't we get started with today's session? I know some of you folks were there already, David and Terrence. Why don't some of you walk us through or give us a quick intro about what was your experience like at the workshop on Monday, and where were you, or were you able to run through everything, stuff like that?
Yeah, I was able to run through all of the notebooks that they had.
Great.
And I mean, the experience was great. It was a little fast, as Mash said, but it was great. They had a lot of discussion that I know I'm going to have to go back and listen to around various topics, because they went in depth. Just looking at the notebook, you may not be able to see all that went into it, at least in my experience, because I don't have the experience as maybe some of you guys. I think it would be beneficial to listen to it probably multiple times.
Yeah, so for those of you who weren't here or who didn't know what was going on with the workshop, It's basically a workshop based on the book called Data Science on AWS. And they have workshops every month or so, and it's about 3 to 4 hour workshop, and they do have like 8-hour workshops. I don't know when that happens, but 4-hour workshops, and that was what happened on Monday. And they walk through this folder. And let me just share the GitHub link as well. They walk through the 0 quick starts. And basically, this is a semi-full pipeline, okay, all in notebooks, but pretty much infrastructure as code, which is a very important topic now. Basically, the reason why Mash and I want to emphasize on this book and want to spend time on this book is we realize a lot of times when we do data science, it's really it's really on infrastructure. So being able to write codes in your local Jupyter notebook is great, but we also want to try to learn how we can deploy these resources as efficient as possible. And AWS obviously is the #1 choice, if not top 3 choices available. And this is a great book and a great workshop developed by AWS professionals, and with practical use cases, right? So and the code base is a lot better than the TFX book code base, obviously, but it also covers a lot of great practical use cases as well. So we want to just try to spend some time on this, just so we are familiar with the entire, ML ops ecosystem within the SageMaker. Yeah. Okay. So, Mash, how would you like to start on this? Do you want to walk through really quick on how we can set up the environment for those of you who weren't at the workshop?
Yeah, might need a guinea pig, but so what I'm thinking, and please chime in, folks, is if you guys are open to it, let's set up SageMaker for ourselves. Now, in the session that we had on Monday, they provided us with effectively a Redshift instance through a vendor called Clarium or Volclarium or whatever. It's on the Slack. And all we were told was just follow those instructions and you're going to get a SageMaker environment that is already pre-populated with all of the right policies and so on, and that we were able to work. Now, that was only for that training session. AWS paid for that vendor's services just to do that 4-hour training session. And then after they let us have that for an extra hour, and then everyone's sessions just evaporated. How do we set up our own SageMaker Studio environment with exactly the right set of configurations? And so that's the initial couple of chapters in the book and the initial part of the GitHub repo that they pointed us to. And if the group here is open to it, let's all go through setting it up for ourselves. We're not going to spin up any kind of persistent instance that we're going to incur costs. I've been playing with this for some time now, and the only time I got charged $3.25 or so was after leaving it running for a couple of months with an actual GPU instance that was just left on. But otherwise, for all the work that I've been doing with this Chris Fergley and Antabar's book, I still haven't gotten even a cent of charge, even with the Jupyter Notebook instance. So if you guys are open to it, can we, let's go ahead and set this up. But let's also follow along we'll go through it a little more slowly. Terrence, as you pointed out rightfully, that we went really fast during that session, but let's take our time and try to understand the AWS environment. And then if we master this to a certain extent, when we shift our focus back to GCP, running TensorFlow Extended and pipelines on that, then maybe we can compare and contrast GCP a little bit with AWS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So is everyone fine with that? Is everyone open to that? You know, setting up the environment.
Yes.
Great, awesome. So,
and so you guys are guinea pigs too. So if you're also doing it, I expect you guys will hit some of the bugs that took Wenqing and I a little over 2 hours trying to work through.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started.
Mm-hmm.
And so first of all, you just need to get to the dashboards, and just search SageMaker. Click that. And let me know. Let us know if you're already here, because I assume you already have an AWS account. If not, feel free to create one right now.
And if you're creating an AWS account, a lot of in the old days, I don't know how popular that still is. We used to get a free tier when you set it up with a certain email address, and then when that free tier would run out, use another email account, and then another one, and so on. And I don't know if they programmatically even check email accounts. So if you use Gmail, for instance, and you have your own domain, say you have david@davidsite.com. Well, if you do david-junk@davidsite.com, that email -junk, that will all point back to the original David. However, it's a different email. And you can create additional free tier accounts on AWS over and over. And so you could be working for years with everything on the free tier, with just the free credits. I know we used to be able to do that. I haven't done that.
Okay, please type in the chat if you are on this page. Okay, great.
All right. Let's move on. We're on the console. Let's launch SageMaker Studio. Did we set everything up? We need to set it up though.
Is everyone else following along, or I guess you need a little more time for the rest of the folks? I'm seeing 2 responses.
We're gonna need the console configure IAM.
Okay. All right, so let's dive into this. Okay, so what you need to do is just click SageMaker Studio. As you can see, I have it as a username here. But if you're first time doing this, it will say quick setup, something like that in a standard setup. I just basically chose quick setup. And you would also need to pick an execution row. If not, you need to create one. So I created this. I had a row created several months ago, and what you need to do is you also can check this under a service called AWS IAM. And this is where, for those of you who are relatively new to AWS, this is where you manage all the roles and access and credentials and so on and so forth. So if you work in an organization and you want to give a new employee a set of credentials to the AWS corporate AWS account, this is where you set it up. Okay. So,
This is basically the Microsoft equivalent of Active Directory.
Yeah. So basically, you know, because you don't want to give the admin access, right? And sometimes you don't. You might hire a contractor, and you just want to give limited access. And this is where you set it up. You can create groups. You know, let's say software engineer group has access to XYZ resources. Data science group has access to XYZ ABC resources, and that's where you define the groups, and you can add employee, remove employee, and so on and so forth. Under users, this is where you can create a specific user for and with the user's credentials as well. And if you add user, and you can just type in username, and you can allow access to programmatic access and management console access. And usually I just say both, and you can create, and then you set the permissions and access for that particular user, and then you create that user, and then you can move this user around into the groups or not. The rows, so there are two types of rows, I believe. One row is for I think one row is for service row, and one row is for I forgot what the other row is, but one row is certainly for service row. Basically, these are a bunch of rows that have permissions attached to it, and you can attach these rows under users and policies as well. So some of those rows, if you look into it, it will have, well, that has just one policy. So if you look into Lambda access row, okay, so in some of these rows would have permissions available to create log group, log stream, log events, and so on and so forth. So and that row just means you can execute Lambda functions. Okay, and policies are basically some of those policies would give you, hey, Amazon Athena full access, and then you can attach that to rows. Sorry, to users. So for me, I just have administrator access, and that pretty much includes access to everything. Okay, and what you can do is you can add permissions, user to group, grant permissions, and add existing policies directly. So this is where you can add additional policies to a user. Now, the difference between a user and a row is something that's almost like an agent or a service agent that allows you to execute some resources. And what we're creating here is called SageMaker execution row. Okay, and you can create a row here, or you can create an existing row when you were setting up the SageMaker. So what you want to have is this SageMaker execution rows, and
So Wen-Chan, you did that after you started up the notebook, or just
Not the notebook. You just,
not the notebook, SageMaker.
SageMaker.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, because when you set it up, it will say, which execution row, or do you have the SageMaker execution row set up? Choose
Okay.
existing one or create a new one. If you don't have one, you should create one. But that execution row doesn't have all these access.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you just use the default user, or did you create?
Yeah,
your own?
I just used a default user pretty much, and it says, yeah, I mean, I didn't even name it. I just basically used its own default name.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, 6 policies. We're having a thunderstorm here in New York City. I think we've had historical heat for like the last 100 years. The hottest day or something like that in June for the last 100 years, which is crazy.
Yeah, folks, how are you guys, wherever you are in the country? How's the weather where you are?
I guess we've been lucky in Southern California. It's been not so bad here, but yeah, the Pacific Northwest is super hot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a storm here in Miami, not quite hurricane or anything, but like just I'm right outside Biscayne Bay, and yesterday there was a one of those twisters that turned into hurricanes, tornadoes that cropped up right in the water by us.
Mash, what happened to that condo?
So it's still going. I've been following it quite a bit. It is so if you guys want to know a little bit, it's up the road from me, not too far from me. It's still, Miami-Dade County, North Miami. That Surfside is across the street from Indian Creek Island, which has only 29 homes, and that's the most expensive real estate in all of the southern half of the United States. So Eddie Lampert has one of the most expensive properties there, the most expensive property there. Ivanka and Jared Trump, they bought a home there. So effectively, like, they should have been able to see the Surfside building right from their backyard.
Wow.
And it's a really thin place. So that building, if you've ever been to Miami, it stretches for tens of miles. All along the shoreline by the beach are all these older buildings that are roughly about 15, 20, 25 stories high. And they've been built since they're about 40 years old or so. The Surfside, those apartment complexes, I think they were about 15 stories high. They were 40 years old this year. It was a bunch of different things. Nothing is, of course, known yet. But what we know is the concrete, there was cracks that were forming by the swimming pool. That was one hint of some potential problems. They had an engineer come by, and the engineer recommended like some serious urgent repairs that would have cost, starting at $12 million and more, to repair a lot of these things where the water was leaking into the concrete slabs underneath that hold up the building. And then of course it's right on by the beach. And it is the side that fell is the one that was facing the ocean. And buildings like an L, one of those ends of the L completely pancaked down. If you see the Twitter video, the security video that's been shared on Twitter. There were a few different things that went wrong. So a lot of civil engineers right now are waiting anxiously to find out what they discover, because they're just wondering what mistakes did even regular civil engineers make in their own process that have, that's going to come back to bite them. Sorry, long story. We don't know yet, but it is, if you really want to know more, the New York Times does a podcast called The Daily.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily podcast. The one from yesterday, it was a 30-minute segment on the most that they've been able to figure. And they really go deeper into the stories of the survivors, those who survived, what really happened, what their experience was. There were some stories that have been out on NPR that truly break your heart. This one woman, she just barely got out, and then she ran down, and even as they were running down, everyone could hear the screams, and it went on for a couple of hours until they stopped. I mean, basically all the floor squeezed everyone down. So if you think of how tall a floor is, typical apartments are about 10 feet on average. Imagine that squeezed down to less than a foot.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing came down.
How many people have we found so far?
12
out of 100 people.
12 as of this evening, as far as I know. But we still have about 140 some.
Wow.
That are have not yet been identified or not been found.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
The stories are terrible. Anyway.
All right.
I still want to hear this. Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Mash. So you can add more users to this, and you can just click that, and just again you can use existing row, SageMaker execution row. So you can use the existing row and create more user. Okay, and is everyone done with the execution row? Pretty much. Great, awesome. So now you can just click Open Studio. So, and you should have nothing here, which I have something here, but you should have nothing. And what you want to do is click File and click New, and open up a terminal, which I did it here. And then just git clone this repo.
Which basically is that they copy their repo up to workshop,
Mm-hmm.
and then workshop.git, git clone them.
After you've done that, it will take a little bit of time, especially the last line, checking out files. It will take probably 2-3 minutes to run through this. Oh, by the way, for those of you who, I don't know if you had that issue, but GitHub is, I guess, abolishing the user password credential system. And now it starts to use the username and token system. So you wouldn't need your tokens. It might not happen here, but you would need your tokens if you start cloning down your repo and if you didn't get it set up in terms of your GitHub. So, and for those of you who want to know, it's basically underneath your settings, and yeah, underneath your setting, I believe there is underneath developer settings, and if you click into personal access tokens, then it will basically give you the personal access token. Okay, so and the access token now is your new password, and this is, if you haven't had that, but and it will you'll probably have that soon, because GitHub is deprecating the user password system, FYI. Okay, so hopefully you have this cloned down, and now we're gonna run through some of the notebooks, and as soon as you again, we're using the 0000 quick start folder, not the other ones, okay? And we'll probably try to cover some of the other ones in the next 2 workshops, okay? Basically, this workshop, this folder, and these first couple notebooks.
Anyone having any setup issues so far? If you say no issues, then you guys are having far better luck than Wenching and I had previously, which is possible.
Sorry to go backwards, but I'm having trouble. My studio took a really long time to set up the default user, and I'm having trouble. I forgot how to add the different policies.
Yeah, no problem. So what you want to do is go into your IAM, which is here, or you can search it here.
Okay.
And click on the rows. And find the one that you just created. You know, and it should say last activity today, or
Got it. Yeah.
yeah, and click that one and attach policies. and then search the ones that I listed right here. So,
Yeah,
like
I took a screenshot. So
great, great.
Okay.
Yeah, and as soon as you find that one, and just click and attach policy.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, yes. So for me, the Amazon SageMaker Studio did take some time to load up even. And it would just be the brain, the entire brain logo and circling around. And it will just, it stayed there for like a minute or so, or even longer than that for me. Okay, and once you open up the notebook, it will pop up, a window will pop up, and it will ask you, what type of instance would you like to select? And there are two types of instances. So one would say, not two types, one instance and also one kernel. It will ask you what types of kernels you want to choose. So I'm using Python 3, TensorFlow 2.3, Python 3.7, GPU optimized kernel. So
just FYI, at this class on Monday, we use Python 3 data science. That one I can tell you didn't charge me anything when I've been playing with it.
yeah.
Winchim likes to live on the edge. He
Yes.
likes Ferraris.
And I'm using the accelerated computing for CPUs, 1 GPU, 16 gigabytes memory, and fast launch.
So does that come up right after you set up the kernel?
Yes. So if you set up the kernel, it will basically just select this one for you because this is the only one that has GPUs.
Got it.
And I guess if you unclick this, then it will show you more. It will show you the ones that don't have fast launch, which means will take a little time to launch. But then you have more choices of instance types. And I believe this is where you, if you go down the list, is where you get charged a lot of money. So, but none of this is super crazy, to be honest with you, unless you leave it on for a long time. Yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't go crazy. I mean, on this, just for this workshop specifically. But
and just FYI, even when you run a notebook, and you'll notice this as we get further along, the notebooks start the instance, but the last cell that Chris Fergley and Antabar put in, the last cell in each notebook is to release the resources.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So once you run that, the resource is gone. Okay. Otherwise, what happens is, and this is why AWS makes a lot of money, right? So they charge you on instance hours, just like, so even by opening up this notebook, it's like you're running a server, right? With that flavor. Accelerated computing, M4, G4, DN.X large, 4 CPUs and 16 gigabytes and 1 GPU. So that's the instance or server you're running this notebook on. So even if you're just opening up a notebook, you're being charged somewhat. But, again, it's not a lot of money if you just run through it and close it down. And it's probably not even $1 or $2 if you just do that.
Terrence, you said you're having a problem. Your user for SageMaker is not showing up on IAM?
That's correct. Don't know why.
Did you refresh
I
You-
did.
So let me just, did you look into the,
Maybe I remember.
did you look into the rows?
I did not. I looked at. I can. Let me see. I see the rows. There's a number of different rows.
Yeah, look at the today's last activity today.
So look at. Got you. That's activity. So that's the. Okay, and then select that one.
Yeah, do you have an execution, SageMaker
do.
execute? Okay, click that one
Okay.
and then just click attach policies. Then you can just start attaching these 6 policies.
Okay, so the user account did not show up in. I see.
Yeah, so the
I
difference
got you.
again, yeah, the difference again between users and rows, users for people.
Mhm.
Okay, that's me. Rows for services.
I see.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
Okay,
Gotcha.
and Deepai has a question. So I'm at the SageMaker Studio. I choose Quick Start Radio and choose the row I made. What's the next step? I'm sign out. Okay, so someone sign into my Zoom account or the TWIML Zoom account. That's fine. The next step is basically what we just went through with Terrence Deepai. Basically, just add the policies. And after you're done with that, go back to your panel, SageMaker Studio control panel, and you just you should have a user here, and it will say Open Studio here, and just click Open Studio. And you should have your execution row should show up here as well, and the status should show ready.
Deepai and others, are you guys at this page yet that Wencheng has on the screen?
Okay, so okay, David is in the notebooks now. Heather is waiting for the studio to launch. Great. Okay, so let's take 2 minutes and just wait a little 2 minutes, and then we can then should be enough for you folks to get started with the SageMaker.
Once you guys have SageMaker up, in theory, you've got this set up. The environment is ready. Any code that you write, you don't have to necessarily use your local machine. You can now do all of your data science work on SageMaker over here. You can save all your notebooks, everything that you have, your data files, all of it on this S3 bucket. And S3 storage is cheap. It is seriously cheap. Cheaper than actually buying physical hardware and keeping for years and years. So just in theory, this is it. Now you have access to whatever kind of GPU instance that you want. If you want the Ferrari, or if you want something just traditional ML, just CPU based, all fine.
Yeah.
These additional capabilities that you can spin up as making those models available in the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why we want to try to get you guys familiar with the ecosystem. It's because as you can see, and we've been doing this for a couple months now. ML pipelines is all integrated, and from all the way from the data, raw data, to pre-processing, to training the model, to monitoring it, to basically evaluating it, then deploying it, then inferring on your model. Now, instead of doing it in every component, and also not having a complete set of service, SageMaker does offer you pretty much everything, right? So SageMaker Studio now is sort of a focal point or a center point where you can just call a bunch of services, let's say from S3, which we will do right away, and so you're not playing around with local data anymore. You're directly calling from S3 bucket, or from Athena database. Then you're processing it right away in SageMaker, and then you deploy it right away into SageMaker, and you create an API in AWS API Gateway. So everything is so much more integrated when you choose a platform option like this. So that is something at least I'm very fascinated about. And a lot of times, unless you're doing research, you really eventually need to deploy these services, these models, the data somewhere, right? The data needs to live somewhere on a database. The pipeline needs to live somewhere, maybe a container deployed somewhere on a server, or ECS, like what we talked about, and the model needs to live somewhere, needs to be served. Then they can't live on your local laptop. And this is why I think a lot of times, when we do data science, we want to do it with infrastructure. And when we learn it, we want to learn it with infrastructure. So, okay. So is everyone good? Heather, is your studio launched?
Yep, I've got everything cloned, and I think I'm good to go.
Great. And Deepai, are you good to go as well? Still in pending. Okay, so your status still says pending? Okay. All right, so let's give it one more minute.
Yeah, this is the hard part. Once everyone's gotten to a point where the status is ready, we're good to go. We're going to be rock solid going forward.
Yeah.
Forever and ever. Like, do your projects, do whatever you want here.
Yeah, and as you can see, and I was just complaining to Mash that they shouldn't charge you on notebook usage because it's just built on Jupyter Lab, and Jupyter Lab doesn't charge you anything, but it is what it is, so yeah.
I used only that low-level Python 3 data science instance, and every time I ran it, when I did shut that service off for each and every notebook, mind you, so far I haven't gotten charged even a cent. So just FYI.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of times I think the money starts to go up, the cost starts to go up when you start training heavily, for like 10 hours. That's where that's when you see, pretty much when your bill starts going up. And a lot of these, right? A lot of these are like, I don't know, 50 cents, $1 max per hour. So if you just run through this, that's like a couple of seconds, right? And that's why a lot of these probably, don't incur much of cost at all.
We start learning through this, we're not going to be rebuilding a full model entirely. We're going to be doing a little bit of transfer learning. So what they used in the AWS course, for the BERT feature engineering, they pulled in the Hugging Face model, which is already pre-trained, and then we added a little bit to it towards the end, and this is basically transfer learning, and then you've got the whole thing. And so you're not going to rebuild the model, you're really going to be reusing existing frameworks that are known, proven, true. So if in the case of natural language processing, we'll use Hugging Face. In the case of vision, they're the ones from Google and others that are pretty strong, good, and they're published and publicly available, and so on. So now if you're doing something entirely original and you're building and training a model that is entirely yours, that's when we're probably going to incur some good bit of money.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we start going through the notebooks, I want to show you a couple charts from the book. To have a good idea of what SageMaker is doing is basically in these charts. Okay, so and we have different options. We can have real-time or batch predictions, or we could have, right. So we could have real-time predictions, we could have batch predictions, and obviously real-time predictions would require very low latency, and batch predictions obviously, is not as strict on these requirements. So what happens is your application it could be a real-time, your model could be a real-time API, and that's where your model lives, and it has a real-time endpoint, and it could provide super fast predictions on single prediction requests over HTTPS. For example, we can deploy, scale, and compare our model prediction service with SageMaker endpoints using the REST API protocol with HTTPS and JSON as shown here. So, and to be more specific, you could have some input data from your S3 buckets, okay? And you could use SageMaker to query that data and output that into some S3 buckets, and also save that into RDS or DynamoDB, and those are all, I believe, SQL-based databases. And then your application can query that, and I think this is more so perform. Okay, so for less latency sensitive application that we should deploy as a batch job. So we could do that as a batch transform architecture as well. And let me see. And this is what basically real-time prediction looks like with SageMaker endpoints. Your model could be model 1, model 2, model 1, model 2, and you could have 2 availability zones, and your application could be making HTTP plus REST API requests to these endpoints from multiple, I guess, availability zones. Okay, so in these endpoints are by default distributed containers. Okay, so those are all containers, and they're distributed. Therefore, allows you to have pretty high availability and also scalability as well. So your model is deployed across multiple cluster instances, hence, the scalability. Okay, and the book goes over, how to do that with SageMaker SDK. And this is where, infrastructure as code comes in, and we're going to spend a little time down the road on some of these. And it can certainly be helpful when you are relatively, comfortable with this, and you're like, hey, let me just try it all from a code standpoint, instead of doing everything in SageMaker Studio. Okay, so let me go back to the notebooks. So if you've gone through, if you just basically say restart kernel and run all cells, it will go through this overview notebook, and it will pop up. It will have a bunch of images, some HTML stuff, and it will just shut down your kernel for this notebook to release resources.
And nothing really of a consequence in the 0.0 overview notebook, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And our use case is fine-tune a BERT model and create a text classifier. What we are using is Amazon customers reviews data sets. And this is quite, it's a pretty realistic data set, and it's very practical, and it has a bunch of columns and features. So, and we're using, one of the latest best model for this data set. So this is a very practical workshop. And
one of the things, sorry to interrupt, Wencheng.
Yeah, no worries.
There are two papers up to this point that was described that we needed to read. These are now the modern classic papers from only less than 2 years ago. One is Attention is All You Need. Wencheng had mentioned that, I know, in the last several weeks or so. That one, and the other one is on the BERT architecture.
Yeah, so I
Mhm.
have actually covered these two papers previously. And I think for BERT, I covered 5 sessions. For Transformer, I covered 3 sessions in different classes within the TWIML community. If you're interested, just send me a message. I'll probably be able to find some of these video recordings. Okay, so we have this data set with a bunch of features: marketplace, customer ID, review ID, product parent, product title, product category, star rating, helpful votes, total votes, Vine, verify purchase, review headline, review body, and review dates. Okay, so we're all, everyone has bought something from Amazon, right? I don't think you can live nowadays without Amazon, especially after COVID. But a lot of reviews, what I've found, and this might be a personal note, a lot of reviews are not, they're over, the rating is pretty high, but then you scroll down, a lot of reviews are not very good. That's something that I've noticed from purchasing a lot of stuff on Amazon. Just a personal note. Okay, so set up dependencies. Again, all you need to do, and they've done a fantastic job of trying to make this reproducible. All you need to do is just restart the kernel and run all cells. And we've all done this before, Mash and I, and some of you. So all we are doing here is to check the Python version. If you're selecting the Python 3.7 kernel, then your Python should be 3.7.10 and GPU optimized. And all we're doing is basically installing a bunch of libraries that we need. One of them is obviously SageMaker. And we are installing the TensorFlow 2.3.1 and matching the kernel. And for those of you who have selected this, you probably have already had TensorFlow 2.3.1. And we need transformers. This is probably from Hugging Face. Yes, Hugging Face transformers. And we need Athena. This is where we do some SQL queries from the AWS Athena service. Matplotlib, Seaborn, those are for visualization and list all the libraries and set up dependencies passwords. That's just true. I was trying to find that when I was talking to Mash, but it's just a true variable that they wanted to store somewhere.
Yeah, and the store, that magic command, the Jupyter magic command percentage store, Wencheng was able to uncover that is saved in the Jupyter instance memory.
Great. Then you just release the resource. So the notebook stops counting the time, I guess.
That Jupyter, that saved store, that still stays in Jupyter, mind you.
Yeah. So okay, so let me just run through this. So if it's green, that means it's counting the time. Okay, and I just run this. I just ran this, and it's the green signal is off. That means it's shut down. Okay, so I have 5 notebooks running. Okay, and as you can see, technically that's still running. Okay, so just so you know, technically that's still running.
You can go into, when you select it, go under File, Close and Shut Down Notebook.
Yeah, so unless you do File, Shut Down, it's still running. Okay, closing the tab doesn't stop it from running. Okay, or you can run through this cell, and as you can see, I just ran through this, and the green button is gone. Okay, now I have 4 notebooks. All right, so I don't need to open up these notebooks. Let me just shut them down. Shut down.
No. Close and shut down Notebook.
Oh, yes. Close and shut down. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Close and shut down Notebook. Close and shut down Notebook. There you go. All right. So, and now we have number 2. Okay. Query the data set in S3 using Amazon Athena and AWS Glue Catalog. So this is, you know, what you can see here is if you're running this block of cell, this code block, outside of SageMaker, it would not run through because it doesn't know what execution row it needs, and what, you know, session and the credentials it needs. So when you're trying to run this outside of SageMaker sudo, you need to make sure you provide all that. But when you're running this inside of SageMaker Studio, it's already configured for you, and it's probably in the environment variables or something like that, and you can just get that already. And that's the convenience of using SageMaker Studio. Okay, so what you need to do is, again, run through this. But what we want to talk about is, this is quite cool. For those of you who don't know what Athena is, it's basically using S3 buckets, but using it as a, so it's basically S3 bucket as SQL database. Okay, so you're able to write SQL queries querying the data that sits in an S3 bucket. And of course, S3 is dirt cheap, but you need to pay a little bit money on Athena. Again, it's not a lot because we're not doing a lot of queries here. But I would say it's probably cheaper than having a full RDS a SQL database, because what you're paying is a query and S3. S3 is dirt cheap, right? And you're paying a query. I suspect that's probably the case. And yeah, let me double check, I guess. Athena pricing, AWS. Price per query. There you go. So we're talking about $5 per terabyte of data scanned. $5 just for a terabyte of data scanned. It's still pretty good. So you're not, with that combination, you don't even need an SQL database. But on the other hand, you want to make sure your data is clean enough to even use this, because a lot of times data is not clean. And if you just dump a CSV file into your S3 bucket and start using Athena, there's still a lot of cleaning that needs to be done, and it might not be the way to go. So depending on your use case, this might not be a good option. Okay, so for those of you who have run through this, you should have, you should be able to, you should run into an error or something. Well, actually, you might not, but what you want to do is you want to go to AWS Athena. So let's go back to.
And this part is really cool.
Yeah. So you want to search Athena. And, I wanted to just test the query on Athena itself. And now you should have a table that says Amazon reviews per Kate after running through this notebook. Okay, because the Athena table was already created from here with this particular statement. And what's very interesting is that, I was like, why are they using pandas? And they just call pandas to read the SQL, pretty much. That's all it is. Okay, and establish the connection right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Modern data science, you're just blending Python and SQL and everything all together.
Okay, so we the S3 bucket, I believe it's is it a public S3 bucket, Mash?
Reviews, yes, that is a public S3 bucket that you've now copied over here in this notebook to your local S3. So it takes this S3 / Amazon reviews PDS, and it has copied it over. Now, if all of you, if you move over to your S3 bucket, open a new tab and go to the S3 page, what Wencheng was just showing.
Yeah. Oh, you meant the Athena?
Yeah, Athena. Yeah. Sorry, did I said the Athena page. And now you'll see that this is saved. That's why you see on the the left side, the tables, Amazon Reviews Parquet, that table partition is sitting in your own S3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so if you run this query, and it will show the data, it will show the data now.
I'm getting an error saying no output location provided.
Yeah, so what you need to do is, so we had that same error. What you need to do is create a S3 bucket. So for those of you who have not had experience with S3, just search S3 and create a bucket and just create a bucket name. For me, I just basically said, data science on AWS workshop.
I did Athena results, and it's my generic catch-all S3 bucket for any and all Athena results, because I want to use Athena with running SQL queries with that Athena console page where you saw, running a certain few lines of SQL command and gives you the result. I'm just going to use, throw it into just any default container. You can create other buckets as you need for specific projects, but for default, I just figured, yeah. Or what Wencheng said, data science on AWS.
Yeah, okay, and keep everything else the same, and just hit create bucket. And S3 bucket doesn't, creating a bucket doesn't, I don't think it charges you anything unless you start storing things. But again, S3 is dirt cheap. So even storing a bunch of files still doesn't cost you much. Okay, so if you run through that query, which I just did, right? And it will say, it will show up the column names that we went through, right? And those are the reviews, right? This is the review body. And we basically just said, for those of you who understand SQL, it basically just, select everything from, make sure you have the database name, which is default right here. And the table name that says Amazon Review Parquet, default Amazon Reviews Parquet, where product category equals digital software, limit 100. So we're basically just showing 100 rows of data where product category equals to digital software. And okay, so we get marketplace US, customer ID, review ID, product parent, product title. Okay, so we're looking at QuickBooks Pro 2013, Microsoft Office Professional 2013. Who buys QuickBooks from Amazon? All right.
This set is from like 2013 or much earlier. Back then, that stuff was, packaged software.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's when you have the CDs and DVD or CDs to even install like Microsoft systems.
My kids don't even understand disk drives.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so start ratings. Okay, 1, 5, 4, basically 1 through 5. Helpful votes. Okay, those are, this is what I was talking about. Basically, helpful votes. A lot of times we could have a bunch of high, it could say 4 point something rating, and you scroll down to reviews, and the highly helpful votes are all very negative. It could be like 1, rating 1, and this is where I think Amazon's algorithms playing a little bit trick here. If you are not careful, if you don't scroll down and just paying attention to the star rating, you might be buying something, defective. Okay, so total votes, Vine, I forgot what Vine was, verified purchase, yes, no, review headline, review body. Okay, great. So this is relatively clean data, as you could imagine, right? And that's why this is fine to, you know, just like S3 to Athena and stuff, because it doesn't require, it's probably already cleaned a little bit, I would suspect. It might not. I don't know how Amazon's internal system works, but it's relatively clean. And this is when you can, you know, reduce the cost, and you just want to get something down, and just use S3 and Athena together. Okay, so SQL statements. Okay, run a sample query, and again, you could run a sample query here as well. But I was just trying out Athena, but you know, they were just using read SQL. That's how they, you know, Pandas again it's just a great library, and I use that for a lot of data pipeline work as well. You know, I use this function all the time. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this notebook, and we're just basically querying the data sets, looking at it, and storing the data sets in you know, S3, and loading it up from Amazon Athena, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's close and shut down notebook. Now, number 3. So this is kind of going to the EDA. Mash, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Not much to really talk about. I mean, other than it was just you can follow along. All this did was show, here are some quick little visualizations of what's in the tables. So you can kind of see how product categories are distributed. And rather than doing it for all, they did a quick, they just took 3 of them, 3 categories at a time, and did the full thing. And they provided a picture for, if you were interested, for all categories, all ratings, and so on. But don't run it on your own, because even this EDA, to get this visualization, does take a good bit of time.
It did. Oh, wow.
It did. So they just only did like, okay, let's just run it with just, you know, a small subset, and you'll get the outputs for that subset. But and they said, you know, inevitably somebody will always ask the question, what if we do it for all? I want to do it for all. Well, you know, here's what picture of what running it for all would look like. And that's it. It's just, you can see the run for each of this. And you walk through, you guys can do this on your own pace. Just read through how they do the EDA. Again, the whole purpose of doing EDA and analytics is you try to dig into the data and try to uncover nuance about the data. Like, you know, product categories seem to be distributed this way, or, you know, the reviews, some kind of insight about the reviews that's going to be useful when you are building a model.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, and notice how, you know, this is something that I was basically, a lot of times you want to have a balance between using SQL statements and using pandas functions, right? So pandas, you know, SQL statements is using the database instance, and the pandas functions is using your instance. Okay, your deployed instance, and right now it says no kernel because the last cell was run through. And what you want to do is you want to have the basic data processing done from the SQL level. And SQL is usually faster than pandas from there?
SQL's state, I mean, it may be old, it may be 30, 40 years old, but it is still the fastest way to do any kind of data work, or even variants of SQL like MySQL, Transact SQL, Snowflake has their own version of SQL, et cetera, et cetera. So always helps to and I should do this better, to understand code SQL.
Yeah, and when it comes to complex transformation, this is where you don't want to use SQL. This is where you want to use pandas or some other processing transformation libraries such as Spark or Dask. Again, you know, pandas is still pretty damn helpful, and pretty much the line to draw in terms of using pandas and something else is if it can be loaded into pandas, if you have enough memory, do it in pandas instead of Spark or Dask. Yeah, go ahead.
Those are parallelized methods. Dask and so on, they allow you to run those transformations in parallelized format. If you're doing it a straight direct run, there's one other tool that should be mentioned, R. R does do a really good job of straight transforming data sets and doing data prep, data cleaning, and so on. Academics prefer to use R.
Absolutely. So with Dask, I was testing Dask with the Chicago taxi data sets, and it has a bunch of files. Dask, you know, I was testing Dask on a ACPU M1 machine. I was able to do it within, I think, 10 minutes or so, loading up all the data. But using pandas, since pandas can parallelly load data, it has to load sequentially, concatenate all of them together and load it in. It took me a whopping, I think, 50 minutes or so. So talking about, you know, Dask versus pandas. And it wasn't even tons of data, but that parallel loading capability does help a lot, you know, when it comes to, you know, using something beyond pandas. Okay, so we're not going to go through all this because that's not our purpose, and we want to try to run through this ASAP. So any questions at this point? Okay, and this is, I guess, you know, this is all EDA stuff. And if you want to learn, you know, or get better on SQL, hey, you know, I think those are great examples to go through and just learn more on how these people are using SQL to query data. But again, I wouldn't use SQL to clean and transform in a complex way. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to read your SQL. Okay, so that's that. Let me shut down this notebook. I think I ran through this, so let me just shut this down. Oh, it's already shut down. Okay. Detect bias class. With SageMaker Clarify, I think this is relatively new, Mash.
Yeah. And if you guys want to jump in to David, Terrence, Clarify was made available as of this past last reInvent in December. So it's about 6 months old publicly. It is another AWS service, Amazon SageMaker service, and it does embedded all of the model interpretability, everything. So you run a clarify session with your data and you can get a good bit of results back. That's one here. And then when you've built, and this is just from the EDA, this is just from the analytic ready data set. And so you get information, insights that you would be looking for very manually when you're doing EDAs. But then if you were to finish building a model, you could also then call the clarify session and would give you the model interpretability results, the Shapleys, the line, all of that, and then some. Clarify they pointed us to a lot of documentation for Clarify, and I am personally blown away. And I think, Terrence, that's what you meant. Clarify and looking at understanding bias in the data and so on, using Clarify to do that was something they spent a good bit of time talking through, but they went very fast. And I think this is an area where everybody needs to really understand how to use SageMaker Clarify to look at any and all data that we have to work with.
Yeah, so apparently this cell takes about 5 to 10 minutes to run. And any ideas why?
Clarify sessions where Clarify has to run through its whole composition of all the different tests, modeling and tests that it has to do.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read through all of Clarify's documentation to really even begin to understand it, to be able to explain it and teach it better. But certainly something I'm going to need to do.
Okay, so let's look at
Terrence, David, anything else you guys want to share about what you recall about Clarify?
No, I think you've kind of done a good job. And I'm with you. I think I need to dig into the documentation.
Yeah, same.
Okay, let's look at the features, SageMaker features.
And Google has a version, their equivalent of Clarify, that they put a lot of emphasis on. And all companies, bias in data sets has become obviously a really big issue, especially on the way certain data sets are used. And we've had some pretty interesting cases, largely out of Google. AWS has had its share, but you don't mess with AWS.
Yeah, this is cool. I'm looking at this, and this seems very cool. I like how this is so integrated, and I wish. I suspect Vertex AI is moving towards this as well, but I wish they had something like a workshop like this. Class imbalance. KL divergence. Very cool. Monitor your model for bias. This is where a part of the ML pipelines comes in, as a monitoring step. You can start monitoring your model. Very cool.
So
is this
model monitoring is going to you use Clarify also. Once the model is prepared and trained and retrained automatically, and you've got it built in a pipeline, you'll use Clarify to get some salience model statistics out, and then it create a trigger to say, well, if the model goes beyond the newly trained model, crosses certain benchmark thresholds, then stop it, don't use that, alert so-and-so, send emails here and there. I know that's something that you can do in Azure. And if you can do it in Azure, I'm willing to bet money you can do that just as easily in AWS. And that's where all this will come in. When you're operationalizing and deploying a full solution model.
Yeah, and one open source tool for this is I think I heard one talk on this. It's called ClearML. So it's able to basically data. I'm trying to see if there are graphs that I can show you folks. Resources, block, documentation. What does documentation have? Okay, this is a tool that helps you to visualize your model performance as well, and it doesn't just stop there. It has an orchestration process, deployment, bunch of other stuff. So, and this is open source. I think it does have an enterprise tier, and that's why it says pricing. A lot of times nowadays, open source doesn't mean it's completely free. It might have a free tier, but it could also have a paid tier to sustain itself as well. So, okay, back to that. It's running. Okay, I think some of that ran through. Oh no, it's still running. 5 to 10 minutes, I guess. Let's wait a little bit longer. And let me open up another notebook. And since we have a bunch of CPUs and one GPU, so I'm sure we're fine. Okay, so feature transformation with scikit-learn in this notebook. Understand BERT embeddings.
Yeah, now we start getting a little deeper into two things. Number one, to the transformers, the BERT transformer that we're going to use. And number two, also into the idea of feature stores. Does everybody understand feature stores? Because this is a fairly new concept and service that's made available. There were feature stores that were made by open source like companies like Wensheng described and just mentioned. And then it sort of got subsumed by AWS, the platform, the AWS and Google creating feature store services. There. Feature store really is just what you kind of see on this picture. It's the transformations and how you do a transformation on a raw data set to create exactly the kind of analytic ready data set that you need to do your model building. And so the feature store is, think of it as the SQL code that's used to transform the raw data set, but still have it accessible. So the output of the transformed data set is still usable as an S3 object, like a table.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're pretty much just selling you the embeddings, right? The trained embeddings, the updated weights. And then you can just query the embedding and use that. Which is pretty cool. So a lot of times, I think, I don't know if this is something that we're this is fairly new to the extent that I don't know whether it's gonna, like go up and go down, or it's gonna stay here for a while. But it's certainly a new trend that we're seeing. Basically, hey, a lot of companies don't even need to train their models. They're like, Google, sell me your model embeddings, sell me your features, because I don't want to even train it myself. I'm just going to buy it from you because you had the infrastructure to train it. Let me just buy it from you and just use your embeddings. And then I can, play around with that. Or, I could, have your embeddings and trim, further fine tune my model based on what you have here. Okay, so we're done with that. Great. Fantastic. Okay, analyze bias on balanced data sets with SageMaker Clarify. And this is, I guess, SageMaker Clarify code. We have the S3 bucket.
You define the input of the raw data set that you're going to use and run against into Clarify, and the output.
Set up SageMaker Clarify processing job. How would I review the Clarify?
So those look right below.
It's the review bias report, right? Okay.
Yep.
Great.
There you go.
Awesome. So this is, I guess, this is the analysis reports, and we have the pre-training bias metrics. Oh, this is cool. I like that.
So now you've got the KL divergence, those all of that, all those metrics are then computed that you can walk through, and these are things that from a statistics standpoint you need to understand, and so you can begin to uncover the extent of bias, the extent of imbalance, the extent of just the nuance in your data set.
Very cool. Any other reports? Review S3 output data after the CloudWatch logs. Generated bias reports. Data balanced. Report HTML.
Yeah, we didn't get into this, but all this stuff is here. You should be able to. You can click on the object. You just go back. Yeah, that one. You click on that report PDF.
Yeah, I can just open and just download it, and let's look at it. It might be the same. Okay, it's the same reports, but in PDF formats. But it's basically saving it for you in your S3 buckets, which is cool. Okay, so and it has a bunch of other formats, JSON formats, so you can process it programmatically if you want, and even a Jupyter Notebook. Very cool. All right, so I have the bias, data generated, data balanced, transformed. Okay, I have the transformed data set, which is 159 megabytes, and that's just for software, video games, gift cards. And we have the data balanced. And this is why, again, this is why we're leaning towards now doing this all on a platform, because as soon as you're done with something is saved in the S3 bucket, deployed. It's not saving locally. Everything is, just so convenient and automated. instead of you building a bunch of pipelines yourself. Okay, so we also have the processing job. That is the clarify pre-training bias. We have the inference notebook. We have the processing jobs that says it's completed, and one took 5 minutes, one took 4 minutes. And we're under processing jobs. Okay, and let's look at the logs. CloudWatch log is another service that AWS provides. Allows you to track pretty much every service that you use. And it is something that I use heavily to debug AWS services. A lot of times, it does take a little bit of time to debug, what's going on, why isn't this service running, or why isn't this giving me the results I want. And typically, every service has an option that allows you to save logs into CloudWatch. And so CloudWatch is a fantastic tool to help you to debug. It also has, the dashboard allows you to, monitor your service, and it also has container insights as well if you're running containers. Again, very fantastic tool. So this is the CloudWatch log that we got from SageMaker processing job to clarify pre-training bias. And as you can see, we basically have events. Okay, and it should be finished running. So SageMaker XAI analyzer run successfully, and it basically just says, on the info level, from this timestamp, starting this clarify processing job, blah blah blah, number of hosts in the cluster is 1, calculating pre-training bias metrics, calculating bias statistics for the reports. Okay, collected analysis generated successfully. So if it's not running successfully, it might say something here, and then right? Instead of just having a single line of error, you can trace back what was going on from CloudWatch. Very helpful stuff. Okay, so I kind of want to pause here to see if there are any questions. I know we're sort of running behind a little bit, and we, obviously we want to try our best to run through these, but any questions?
If I may share, in the span of time that we've spent here, we went at a more human pace, a more normal pace of getting our environment set up and just getting ourselves exposed to the initial components and services needed to build a pipeline. And up to this point, this is the core part of any data scientist's work, to really understand the science embedded in their data. I think we made some pretty good ground. Continuing on, I think the next step would be getting into building the transformer BERT models, feature engineering and so on, and then actual model building, and then the model deployment and interpretability. That's also important, useful stuff, but that becomes an entirely new topic. But what does everybody think of? Was this useful and valuable for you?
Yeah, it was great to be able to get it set up on our individual AWS. That was really good.
Yep, Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
what were you guys using? If you, because I assume you've had this all set up previously when you were doing the workshop, right?
Yeah, well, they had like kind of auto set up for us in kind of
Yeah, the vendor, Volcarium or whatever,
Oh,
they had that Redshift container. It was all, the image was set up. All we had to do was just log in. Everybody got the exact same credentials. You just use it, pops up, and you've got an image instance running with everything set
right.
up. That's why we didn't have to worry about anything we did with IAMs and policies and roles.
Yeah.
All that was already pre-baked into the image that everybody used. And that image evaporated 1 hour after the class.
Got it. Okay.
Now we all have our own SageMaker instance ready to use.
Yeah.
It's on AWS. So whatever we want to do, we can each of us can now do our own good work.
Exactly. Exactly. And now all of us know, and all of you know, that we can just spin up a SageMaker instance and start running the notebooks if you choose to. But if you don't want to do it, you can do it in other, text file. I guess you can probably do, assume you can probably do .py, I don't know. But you can certainly do notebooks and, start calling a bunch of other resources on AWS to integrate into your pipeline, which is pretty cool, and you can start using these new tools that SageMaker just came up, 6 months ago, like Clarify, to kind of give you more insight and visibility to your model, which is pretty cool. So,
And I'll speak for myself as somebody who was married to Microsoft for a long time. Microsoft for me is sort of my baseline. Using Azure Machine Learning Studio, and that should be classified as a dangerous weapon because it is drag and drop, and you can do some very powerful machine learning models that you can deploy and operationalize in moments, and it is complete. It is truly end-to-end complete, and it's anyone can do it. It doesn't require any significant experience. So that's my starting point. And when I look at all of this that we have with AWS, for me, this is so much more complete with services, components, and capabilities that are absolutely essential, like Clarify, as one example. And Google, having also worked extensively with Google, fits in between Azure and AWS, somewhere in the middle.
yeah. All right. So I think this is probably a good time to stop, and let's continue this, and get to the point of finishing this up and talking a little bit more about the book. Obviously, that's the whole idea. I think the book is even more extensive, right? And it's even more coding based, and it's so let's continue this journey of AWS SageMaker and SageMaker pipelines, in the next couple of sessions, and we could, possibly just extend one session if necessary. No problem at all. I think this is very promising as well, and way much more commercialized than I would say TFX, but way much more probably ready, when it comes to industrial scale ML ops. So that's my 2 cents. What do you folks think?
No, I think it's great. I do have a question, Chin.
Yeah.
The actual Git repository that was pulled down, is that stored locally, or that would be done each time you log in? And
Yeah, so this is basically, I don't know how, so once the notebook is shut down,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, I don't know if it's still charging you money just having this repository. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, because I don't see it like in an S3 bucket or anything. So I'm just wondering
Yeah,
where it
this is
is.
just sitting in your SageMaker studio.
Mm-hmm.
Mesh, did they say anything?
No, no, they did not. But Terrence, I think everything we've done so far, even if you shut down all the instance, including even the SageMaker Studio instance,
Mm-hmm.
I have shut it down and then I brought it back up,
Mm-hmm.
and everything that I had, all the documents, everything that I'd get cloned was still there.
That's awesome.
Because that's saying in your S3, and because you're surely below the lowest tier, it should be free.
Okay.
If
Gotcha.
not, maybe it'll be within the first tier. Your first 2 months are free. You can see how this works. I've gotten hit with like $300, $400, $500 bills twice from Microsoft that I've had to take care of that were total surprises. I don't expect that kind of experience with AWS.
Yeah, I did open a question with him, and he said, and I'm not sure what he said. He said something would be like $3, something else would be 25, but I think
Yeah,
25 was
for
the
the whole
entire
book.
book.
The entire book. If you
The entire
follow
book,
everything in
yeah,
the entire book, was going to be $25,
$25, yeah.
which is a great way, to do. The reason why they're doing these sessions, because they had like 300 plus students in the class, and if everybody gets the book, so you buy the book and you do the whole thing, that's a good bit of money for AWS.
Yes, it is.
They just paid their salaries and then some, and their bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just checked the pricing. I don't think they charge you if you just have a repository in the SageMaker Studio. Correct me if I'm wrong, and don't quote me on this. But I don't think you're being charged for that unless you actually open it up
I see.
and use the instance.
Now, I did notice I had something different than maybe what others had experienced. When I
Yeah.
started my notebook up, it did not give me an option to pick anything. It just picked the general
Mm,
for me. I don't know what maybe I did something
mm,
different.
Right. I had
okay.
those. Yeah. I just
You
hit a
had the
picture.
same experience. It didn't ask.
I did. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I did pick the lower one, which is good.
Mm.
But I was looking for it. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I mean, 5 cent again. I think the lowest tier is 5 cents per hour. That's
Hmm.
not a lot,
Yeah,
and
5 cents per hour, and we ran 10 minutes of it. 1 cent.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god.
And it was really neat for them
Cost
to
more.
show how to shut down the notebooks and
Mhm.
after each run, which
Mhm.
was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so and it does obviously go up to $5. That's when you try to train some crazy models.
Yeah.
All right, so damn, this is $28 an hour. Okay, so we can go as crazy to like $28 an hour on this, I guess.
Which is still cheaper than they used to be a few years ago.
Mhm.
When I was doing this for some of the large companies, and I have to actually look at their bills. But yeah, get your corporate card and send the bill to your employer.
Exactly, and exactly right. So a lot of times we worry about how much this costs us, but a lot of times we're not the ones who are paying it. You know what I'm saying? Like we are, and the corporate, the company is paying for it, and that's why a lot of times, um, it's just helpful to use these services a lot, and it saves you time, tons of human resources costs, and potentially save you tons of costs if you use other services, right? I was able to cut down 80-90% of server costs my client has, and by switching everything to AWS. and everything serverless container, and it's fantastic. So, all right. So I want to stop here, and just anyone has any feedback or comments or suggestions, please let us know now, and or if any questions before we close this session.
Yeah, I was just curious about the BERT sessions. Are those in the hands-on ML recordings?
Oh, that was not, I believe. No, we had a NLP class, the Stanford CS224 class, and we I did a talk on 3 sessions covering the paper of transformer and the TensorFlow tutorial and the math behind it, I believe, a little bit, the architecture. And there was another group called NLP for Papers. That's where I did the BERT talks. I can send the recordings over.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, me too, Wenjing. I'd be interested to go over them to them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's it, folks. Really appreciate it. I hope this was helpful. I know some of you have already gone through this, but hopefully, we can continue with this journey next week, and continue to dive into SageMaker pipelines and SageMaker, all the other great tools that SageMaker offers, and understand and have a fuller and deeper experience with the ML ops within that particular ecosystem. All right.
We'll be pros by the time we're all done.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks so
Stay
much.
safe, everybody.
You
Yeah.
too.